Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And last weekend I participated in my first ever Game Boy pixel art jam, which was hosted by a group called GB Studio Central over on Itch. So the way that this worked was that on Friday evening they announced a theme for the artwork, and then you had until Sunday evening to complete a piece of Game Boy style pixel art based on that theme. And the theme for this year's event was an awesome discovery. And so basically it's just up to you how you want to interpret that and then create something based on that prompt, with the catch that you've only got about 48 hours to get it done. The nice thing about this jam, thing I really appreciated, is that it wasn't focused on winning. There's no vote or judging or anything like that. It's really just about the community and kind of participating based on our shared collective love for this Game Boy aesthetic. That being said, there is still a prize though, which is that 10 random participants would be selected to get sent an actual Game Boy cartridge that contains the gallery of all these submitted artworks on it. So you'd actually be able to take that cartridge and pop it into real hardware and look at all the artworks that were submitted for this jam. And I think that's a pretty fun way to do it. So of course, with this needing to be compliant with the actual hardware, there are a few technical requirements that are critical here. The first being the overall canvas size of 160 by 144 pixels, which breaks down into being composed of a series of 8 by 8 pixel tiles. The second is that it's restricted to only 4 colors. And for this, because the submissions are going to be compiled using GB Studio, they actually provided us with the exact set of colors that that particular software is going to be looking for. And these colors are of course an approximation of that classic green appearance of the original Game Boy. The last thing is that you're only allowed to have a maximum of 192 unique tiles in the design, which is just over half of what fits on screen. So for everything that I'm creating here, I'm trying to reuse things where possible, and generally just trying to keep the designs pretty tightly adhered into these 8 by 8 units. Designing to the grid like this really makes you more aware of how much space your design is actually taking up and sort of the overall silhouette of it in terms of tiles. And if you were to have even just one more pixel poking out into a new 8 by 8 space, that would all of a sudden count as an entirely new and unique tile design. So it's generally better to keep things inside those grid lines in a sense if you're trying to keep that tile count down. Now you might be wondering, and I was wondering when I started this too, how exactly am I supposed to keep track of every time I've created something that could count as a new tile? Well, luckily they provided a link on the Jam page to this web tool that lets you upload an image and then it spits out the tile count for you. So we can see if I just load in the in-progress version of my image here, it's telling me that I'm currently up to 55 unique tiles so far, and even shows the individual tile sheet and this sort of heat map feature that points out spots where you've only used a tile once or twice. I'm not really sure, maybe that's kind of to show you areas where efficiency could be improved. I don't know. In terms of efficiency, by the way, unfortunately, you're surprisingly not able to reuse tiles simply by rotating or mirroring them. Those still count as unique tiles. And I double checked this by importing a test image that was the same tile design, just rotated and flipped around in different ways. And you can see that even though it's the same core artwork, it's still counting as a unique tile every time. And this wasn't just some inconsistency with the web tool, this is actually accurate to the way that it's read by GB Studio as well. It was explained to me that the reason for this is because for the jam here, we're designing background images rather than utilizing sprite graphics. And it's actual sprites that would allow for mirroring and animations and all that other kind of fun stuff that we can use to manipulate pixel art. But the background is actually just a static piece that gets loaded in once and it kind of sits behind all the sprite work. So because they're going to load these onto a real cartridge after, I think it's the case that a certain amount of memory and the sprite graphics and all that need to be reserved so that they can include a dialog box that pops up to show the artist name and kind of credit all the artists for each piece in the gallery. And that's all right because it's obviously great to be able to have all the proper credits accessible through the gallery. And so with those limits in mind, I'm just sort of plugging along here with this HUD design along the side. Even though there is that tile limit, I wanted to see if I could really sort of push it to still include a lot of additional components on top of just the artwork itself. So I'd been making this airship design, and I'm carrying that airship theme into the HUD with these things like the map and some items here. I guess it's like a cannonball, an anchor, and a bird. I think in the moment, I thought it'd be a funny idea to have like a carrier pigeon that was sort of like a usable item, I guess. So I just kind of ran with that. I only had a couple hours to do this in the evening, so you just kind of roll with the first ideas that come into your head. After adding the HUD, the tile count increased from 55 to 80, and you can see that I was trying to keep it pretty lean still by just surrounding most of that new design with this dark green space. I guess as far as the actual theme goes, I decided to make an airship design because I wanted to set my scene in the sky. And the reason for that is because I figured with the tile limit here, I could always fall back on just having a plain white empty sky and then put the details somewhere else if I needed to, and it'd probably still turn out alright. Now that I'm further along in the piece, I'm finding that the 192 tile limit isn't exactly too strict once you start reusing tiles here and there and filling things out. So I'm adding more tiling here with just a few different cloud shapes that get repeated out. And this does a really nice job of adding some interesting texture and vignetting to the scene while still only being this really light addition to the overall tile count. The way that this connects to the awesome discovery theme is more in the characterization and the dialogue here, I feel, which just provides, some additional context for what the scene is about, I guess. I decided to do this cartoony sort of pirate cat character, and this portrait is designed in a space of 24 by 24 pixels. And I did it mostly in the green and the black tones just so that the white would kind of pop out to draw the attention to the tooth and to the skull on the pirate hat. For the dialogue, I've gone with what's probably the most typical approach of using one tile per letter and just carving out the letters from that solid block. In order for the letters not to bleed into one another when they're sat right next to each other like that, I've generally erased a pixel from the side of the tile. And you could probably do that for the bottom as well if they were going to be on adjacent rows. But in this case, I've laid it out so that there's a full row of empty tiles to separate out each line of dialogue. And after the dialogue, I was up to something like 130-ish tiles, so I still had quite a bit of room left, and I added some other details and bordering to kind of polish the design. So let's go ahead and take a look at just how the final thing came out. Here we go. Alright, well, as you can see, a lot of the final additions here are just about using different colors and different patterns to fill out the sky. And I also made copies of the cloud tiles that are stepped down to darker colors to provide this sort of vignetting at the bottom. The HUD and dialog box now have some bordering to them as well. Some of it gets repeated, some doesn't. It actually turned out that I still had room left over in the tile count. This one ended up at a count of 174 unique tiles. And I just decided to stop there because I felt like I got everything that I wanted to out of it. One last thing I didn't show before, but you can actually download the tile set here, and it's just kind of fun to look at the sort of collapsed version of the design. I'll post some links below for the tile tool and the jam page. I'm really glad I was able to catch this one this time around, and if you're curious to see the other submissions from this year, you can go take a look at that jam page. And they're also going to release the final ROM as a free download, so you could actually pop that into an emulator, or if you were so inclined, perhaps like flash your own cartridge. For now, though, we'll close this off with some CRT time. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.